Hi, Aradhana. Good evening.
Karthik, how are you? It's just you and me again?
Let's see. Let's wait for some more time. We have a user joining us.
Okay.
The first user presentation or the user discussion was scheduled for today.
Oh, good. Very good.
Yeah. So let's just wait for a few more minutes and see if other folks join.
Sounds good.
So I did give a brief update about what we're doing in this working group to the tag delivery folks, tag app, the gap delivery folks, the last meeting. So apparently there is a process around formalizing the working groups. There needs to be a TOC vote that basically recognizes this as a formal working group. I'm not sure when that would happen. Alois and others from CGAP delivery might be interested in taking that forward. So we might have a couple more discussions in that regarding the upcoming SIG meetings.
Sure.
That's one update. All right, I see a couple more folks have joined. Hi, Michael. Good afternoon.
Yeah, hello all. Yeah, hello. How are you going?
I'm doing great.
I'm joining from
And
Sydney,
I also see
from
Mila is,
Australia.
yeah. Great to have you on the call, Michael. Hi, Mila. Morning.
Hi. Morning.
All right. Let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay, I hope my screen is visible. So on the agenda today, we have our first user discussion or user presentation on chaos. So we wanted to get started with inviting members from the chaos engineering space, people who are end users, people who are vendors and maintainers of chaos projects, which probably not listed in this group, to start talking about their experiences in chaos engineering. So this goes into our learnings and makes its way into the white paper. As part of the first discussion, the kickoff today, we have invited Michael. I let Michael introduce himself. He has been in and around the Litmus community for quite some time now, has made a lot of valuable contributions and given us a lot of feedback and shared a lot of info around how he got started with chaos engineering. As we go, we can add more such presentations. I think this was a little bit of a short notice to get Michael in. So I'm not sure if we really have a demo and things like that. And we will go through our slide deck template that we created and go through the questions there and let Michael speak his mind on, how he sort of went about tackling those problems or issues. With that, I think that's the agenda for today. Apart from that, I don't really have any other item. I know Aradhana has been working on some security related documentation, and I've also synced with Sayam. I think Sayam might join this call in some time, who has been working on an initial tutorial for chaos engineering, which will go into the paper. There is some progress on that. I also saw a couple of good handmade diagrams that he's sort of putting together, so that is great news. We will have some update on that. So with that, if there's any other agenda item that you'd like to discuss, please feel free to add it here into the meeting notes and add your surface attendee. We could take this user discussion for as long as we want. We can sort of keep it. I'm sure Michael will be happy to take more questions that are not there in the template. So we can take the for as long as we want.
Sure. Yeah. You're welcome to ask questions. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes, sure. Introduce myself and we go through the questions. So how you like to structure it?
Yep. I think we could start with this. Michael, you can introduce yourself. You can talk about the organizations where you implemented chaos and what were the business cases, and we can go from there.
Yes. So I got my PhD in computer science in 2006, quite long time ago, and it was about distributed architectures, and it was around Java Enterprise Edition in that time. And 7 or maybe already 8 years ago, I moved from St. Petersburg, Russia to Sydney, to Australia with my family. And since then, I have been working as a DevOps specialist / site reliability expert. I joined a number of teams where we didn't have separation between production and non-production, basically. I mean, same people would maintain production and same people would develop the system and implement code as well. Yeah, so I lost this gap between administration and development in that time. And it nicely fits into the what is called DevOps nowadays. In July 2020, I joined Insurance Australia Group, one of the larger insurers in Australia, and to uplift their Kubernetes-based platform for microservices. And we were preparing for tier 1 apps, implementing it. We wanted to verify that our system is resilient. So guys, our management came to me and asked if I can help with ensuring it's reliable enough. And it's quite complicated in general in this highly dynamic environments like in the cloud, where we have plenty of moving parts and multi-tenancy, workloads for different teams. So the only way to do it is to simulate the disruptions and to verify that our system is resilient enough. There are no other practical ways to make sure system is resilient and reliable. And that's when we discussed this chaos engineering thing, because it was everyone knew about it, because it was sort of big bang when Netflix introduced that Chaos Monkey thing. Yeah. On the other hand, everyone was quite scared of chaos engineering, because I guess in the beginning it was marketed in a little bit wrong way. People said that we need to break production. If you talk to some managers, they say we don't want to break production outright, right? So it's like a wrong start of the discussion. But if you start the discussion from saying we need to do and have resilience, reliability, and load and stress tests, because we want to make sure we do not have issues in production. Everyone in management, especially, they say, yes, of course, we want it, right? So that's how we approached it. Basically, trying to avoid term chaos engineering in the very beginning, because it had this sort of strange image, and yeah, but at the end of the day, after proper explanation, people understood that actually chaos being an opposite of reliability, right? It's working like vaccine, so you need to do it in controlled way to understand the system can withstand real problems, real diseases, real issues. Yeah, and so I worked a lot on that as a DevOps consultant from July 2020 to July 2021, exactly 1 year. And now I joined another company. It's one of the biggest telecom companies in Australia. We are also building next generation microservices platform. And I'm using chaos engineering approach to ensure resilience. It's not like 100% of my work, but I covered that aspect as well, and we keep evolving our resilience tooling, resilience testing, using principles of chaos engineering.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess I gave quite a detailed introduction, so maybe
Thanks,
we can
Mike. I
go
think
to
that
questions.
was a great intro. You mentioned a couple of things. We're sort of doing this user discussion a little bit more of a question and answer style, being the first one. I think we can always let Michael come back for a closer look and a demo, and can probably structure the newer presentations a little differently. But just to go ahead, you mentioned a couple of points, Michael. You said chaos engineering the term was a little bit confusing for people, or a little scary for management. And
yes, exactly. Because certainly not everyone is a good engineer, or is not expected to be a good engineer, right? Some people are just like IT managers, and they know this like chaos engineering. Oh, it's something like innovative and risky, in the mind of many people. So ideally, to make it clear for people, we want to add always something like resilience testing with chaos engineering, or ensure reliability with chaos engineering. This way, people like say, "Oh yeah, we want it."
that's a good point. I think
Yeah.
probably we could add some notes that basically talk about how folks can introduce chaos. We are deliberating on adding some literature around how people get started and what is their journey. And this is definitely good to note. Selling it as resilience engineering and doing load and stress testing and controlled failures sort of helps it go better, and instead of calling it really chaos, because the tools that are used can be
Because
used.
if you ask a layman in the street, do you need chaos? Like, no, no, I don't. So, do you want reliability? Like, yes, of course.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess it should be ideally like immediate second step during the introduction of this important engineering subject.
Interesting. The next question was, you mentioned it is a large bank, people were already interested in resiliency, so you sort of went with the single point agenda to improve resilience. But what were the challenges that you faced when you got started? We talked about production and non-production. Earlier it was sort of mixed, and then there was a very scientific practice that came up. People started bringing up DevOps as a function. They had staging environments, production, etc. So you knew you had the environment to carry out these tests. But when you decided, okay, you will start doing chaos testing, resilience testing, as you would like to call it, What were the challenges that you faced, and how did you sort of overcome them?
Yeah, well, so one of the challenges, first of all, we normally do it in pre-production or staging environment, or even in QA environment, not production at this point. So I guess chaos engineering practice in the organization should be extremely mature to expand it into production. I would say there are not many companies in the world who can afford that, But where it actually practically sits in my mind is in staged environment or pre-production environment, where it's you still can potentially break environment, and you are not expected to interfere with quality assurance testing. So if you look into the artificial, classical environment where there are developers sandboxes, there is some integration server, there is environment for QA where some extra testing is happening, including manual. Then we have some pre-production staging environment, which we normally don't touch much. So I would say in this environment, this chaos engineering is best to apply because it is not expected to interfere with other groups. So yeah, but it certainly depends on financing and the capabilities of that particular team. It can be, for example, organized in a way that the development environment at some predefined times, like after hours, can be subject to automated chaos engineering based resilience testing. It's also a good choice. It's exactly actually what we did in my current workplace, because due to project budget and complexities, we have only one non-production environment, and we just need to agree with other team members at which point we can conduct our chaos engineering based resilience testing there. Yeah, so challenge is to coordinate and apply this important resilience testing, because the goal of the test is to break, right? Good tests should do whatever possible to break the system. So yeah, it can be in contrary to immediate users of the system in any environment, right? Somebody wants some endpoint to function for functional testing, for example, and it can interfere with stress testing or chaos engineering based testing. So coordination of time, and it can be also noted that in addition to time coordination, we want to coordinate budget, right? So normally having dedicated environment for this sort of resilience testing is too costly. So yeah, normally in practice it would almost always involve time coordination and some schedule of work being done in the environment in practice.
Cool. I think that was very insightful. That leads us to the next set of questions. You already touched upon it, Michael. So the persona that is actually practicing the chaos engineering, you mentioned that at some point you would like to have some automated resilience tests on sandbox environments, and then do things in a very careful way on the staging environment, because there are other users of that system. So you're doing time coordination, etc. But do you see chaos engineering being done by, or in your experience, was it only done by the ops folks, people who are call themselves SREs, or is it also done by people who are QA, who are actually system or product developers? I understand that you mentioned that that's what you're doing in your current workplace, but generally, is that something that depends upon the culture of the organization? Is that the domain that drives it, or is it just the freedom that management gives, or is it an individual choice? How does it generally work? Who's the persona that's doing chaos today?
Yeah, I would say because chaos engineering, it requires both deep understanding of the system and this mindset of, jack of all trades. So the person should understand both, like how to implement it correctly and how to try to break it correctly. So it's like developer plus tester in classical terms. And nowadays, in practice, it always goes into the so-called DevOps role, right? It's like development plus operation person. If we think about some classical quality assurance person who is not able to, who doesn't know like system from inside, then especially taking into account this multi-component nature of microservices and workloads nowadays, it's very hard to design proper resilience testing without this deep knowledge. And this deep knowledge, it exists in minds of like DevOps people, right? Not classical programmers. So it's certainly ideally fits in between development and operations. So I would even say if we have DevOps term, we have also DevSecOps, right? Development, security, and operations. I'm not sure why we don't have dev quality, ops people, because it's exactly what is needed. So the person is, you see what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So it's called chaos engineering on purpose, right? There is engineering in the name. So engineering is not just about quality assurance.
Well, that's a very interesting perspective. Thanks, Michael. So you mentioned that one of the challenges or the major things that you had to look out for was budgetary constraints and time coordination because the people using the system. That also brings up another couple of points. One is multi-tenancy, or doing chaos in shared environments. Sometimes you have a large staging cluster which many people are using. Many developers might be using it. There may be test folks who are using some namespaces in their Kubernetes clusters, or even in non-Kubernetes environments. It could be a staging system, that test bed that are using. So, did you face any challenges in having to reduce your blast radius to a specific boundary when you were doing your experiments? Was blast radius really a challenge for you, or was it not really a challenge? It's like you had the system for yourself for a specific period of time.
I see. Yeah. So it just by coincidence, in both environments, I practiced chaos engineering. I was the part of the core team owning the whole platform. So and for us, it was convenient to have almost unlimited boundaries during testing. It also, of course, it came with great responsibility, but we just by coincidence didn't face these issues. But I can imagine that in multi-tenancy environments, we want something like network policies, or separation, or limiting chaos testing supporting tools in their blast radius via namespace access, for example. But it can be a design option for like larger systems where chaos engineering is being applied by teams which are some of which are some of the tenants, in this. If you have, for example, 10 tenants in such a system, and one team has an engineer who can do chaos engineering. Yeah, I can imagine that. But I don't think there are many such environments in the world. So normally, if we speak about a platform, normally there are folks in the platform team who can conduct those tests, or they asked to set up. No, there are, if you consider, on the other hand, if you consider, for example, AWS, right? People who are working in AWS, they are tenants of AWS, and they can set up chaos engineering for their cloud products, right? But are there many environments like AWS in the world? Not many, but it's still possible.
Okay, great. The other question was around what were the aids you needed around the core chaos infrastructure? You have the testbed. You also have some chaos tooling with you to carry out experiments. But what are the other aids that you sort of employed as part of your experimentation process? Was there any CI/CD tools that you used? Were there any observability platforms? What were the auxiliary, or rather, the tasks that went along with the core experimentation as part of your resilience efforts?
Yeah, I can certainly answer that. So two aspects. So first aspect, and that in practice, people don't worry much about running something on schedule. It can be triggered manually, right?
Mhm.
But what people care about is that the whole process, I mean, both disruption, both chaotic effect, and measurement of SLOs, SLIs, they are happening in an automated way, because this way we are excluding humans error, and it can be reproduced. So automation in this regard is very important. But speaking of it can be triggered manually though, right? Nobody cares actually in practice that it should be part of CI process. I mean, normally functional tests or unit tests are being executed in CI, but those, if you want, reliability pipelines, they can be triggered once a week, for example, according to this agreement manually. But implementation of those pipelines should be automated, right? It should be just triggering and then analyzing results of such pipelines.
And
So I guess there was another part of your question. So I guess I didn't answer something.
it was about observability. Did you have?
Yeah,
You did
observability.
mention SLIs and SLOs. So yeah, would you like to talk about how you did the observability part of it?
Yeah. In my practice, because chaos engineering is engineering, right? So people really want to define themselves what is correct and what is incorrect. So basically, it's quite essential to have ability to script verdicts of what is expected and unexpected, because everyone's case is special unless it is extremely trivial. So basically, teams want to define the criteria of reliability or success of failure themselves. And it comes to tooling, so something like JSON data should be available, but the final decision should be, we should able to implement some simple scripting which will say, if this and that is okay or higher than particular value, then test passed. Otherwise, it's not. Yeah, speaking of observability, so full logs are extremely important, and everyone asks, where are the logs of the whole pipeline? If pipeline doesn't produce logs, then people don't trust this pipeline. because they want to be able to review and search through it to understand, for example, how decision about resilience or non-resilience was made, like what were the raw values which were used to decide.
You mentioned about pipelines and you mentioned about automated runs that are set up based on some agreements. Michael, have you also participated in game days where there's more than one person carrying out an experiment? You have people from different teams coming together. You have a scenario and a hypothesis in mind that you do manually. Is that practice something that is there? Is that something that you have been part of?
Yeah, in my practice, because normally such platforms have limited budget and people have a lot of stuff to do, like functionality. So resilience is important, but just one of the aspects of what should be carried out. So this luxury of such advanced practices as game days and further, or rolling it out into production, they're luxury which not many people can afford. So I would say in practice, people really want being able to run automated reliability pipelines. They can manually trigger them, and they want to have full logs, and they want to customize what is success and what is failure. So I would think it covers like 85-90% of all environments where chaos engineering is being used. So as advanced practices, they like good, like as in any other area in software engineering or like IT in general, but not many people employ that just because of they have a lot of other stuff to do.
Cool, that's interesting opinion. I think that were most of the questions that we had. Just another final one. So, were there any security considerations or probably do chaos experiment at the security side? I know Aradhana and folks would be very interested in knowing about that. Was that something that you thought about? Is that a requirement that you have come across? What are your thoughts on that in your places where you've already implemented chaos engineering?
Yeah. Normally, especially from IT manager or director of development point of view, resilience testing, stress testing, load testing, chaos engineering, it fits into the same bucket as security. It's like non-functional requirement. So for them, it's convenient and it's justified to see it all as like non-functional. Ensure that system is good, in non-functional way. So security is not broken. So similar to how we want that during stress or chaos effect, our requests are being served for the users. In the same way, we want to ensure that when there is disruption, security is not breached, right? So again, like in real life, those aspects, they are not separated. They always coexist. And I guess so chaos engineering doesn't exist by itself. That's the primary point, I guess, of my speech. There are always aspects like security, like being able to serve requests at some rate. Those questions are always asked. And basically, this you are not able basically to define in advance how systems should behave during chaos disruption. What you can do though is to provide some information, insights into the system to let this particular team decide is it good or not in general from the context of that system in non-functional way. It can involve security question, and can involve number of requests served. it's not able to. We are not able to predict it in advance, right? What we can do is to give them people good APIs, tooling, or indicators to use to draw their conclusion about quality of the system at the end of the day.
There is a question, a follow-up question on this from Aradhana. Michael?
Sorry, I see
is,
some questions in the chat.
Yeah, it's about how did we make sure that the systems and platforms were not compromised during the chaos experimentation, and did you have any detection mechanism that did detect any security breaches, if there were any, and if there was any auto response built, etc. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes. So basically, in layman terms, so we are not, if it is, for example, some API endpoint, we are not just calling anonymous access, right? We are calling the one which requires authentication, and we know that it authenticates using another component. So, for example, if that component which is performing actual authentication is responsible for that, it's unavailable due to, for example, network failure, then the outcome of the request should be fail. It should not go through, right? Rather than be allowed. So basically, again, like in practice, it's extremely hard to separate those aspects. So people, especially like high-level managers or architects, they look at always at the system in a holistic way, right? So chaos engineering is like universal. We can speak about application of disruption or effect, chaotic effect. Yes, it's like more or less unified, right? But when we come to measurement and conclusions part, it should be very flexible to allow context-aware specialization depending on the particular system context.
Right. Aradhana, would you like to add something to that? Probably have any follow-up questions to Michael on that?
Yeah. So Michael, my view of security is where everything is security as code, right? And everything is automated. Detection and response to that detection is automated too. That's my ideal scenario. But in most enterprises, we haven't reached that full state of automation, right? Where you get alerts. There is some automation maybe in organizations, but not everything is automated. And then the whole manual SOC operations, I don't believe in detection, right? It's hard to get the confidence in the resiliency of security in any platform today. So chaos engineering from that perspective is very interesting. But I was looking for some security use cases that you might have used in the past, that you are able to share. I know each organization has their own use cases, but still having some use cases to start with would be very helpful. Did that make sense?
Yes. Basically, I would say that we want to strive to a situation when components which are responsible for security are not available. We eventually have the maximum security applied rather than relaxed security. So I would say it's the major principle. So if something is not available, responsible for security, then deny access. But like
like fail close, not fail open, those kind of things, right? Are really critical in security chaos engineering.
Yes. So we didn't specifically focus on security chaos, but I can imagine that it depends on the age of the project again. So it happened to me that in the both places I was building the platform from the almost very beginning, and those like things like security chaos, it's an advanced practice which normally is like day 2 in my understanding. It's an interesting approach, but again, normally in practice it's relevant to systems which reach some level of maturity. So some basics are certainly being done, like calling endpoint which requires authentication during stress, right? To cover that component which is performing the checks.
You did mention a use case by way of example a few minutes back, I think, Michael, where you injected some network loss against an authentication module and made it not reachable, and checked that your requests were not going through. I think that was the expectation that we had, probably a basic level security chaos test, you can call that.
Yes. So yeah, I would say, again, it would be very practical for like people who are working on improvement of this practice of chaos engineering to give a lot of disruption effects to the community, and give a lot of easily consumable in automation, like indicators, values in JSON if you want, and suggest how to use them. But leave with that, ideally leave as much flexibility as possible to draw in conclusion to particular teams and particular engineers who are users of that. Because envisioning in advance what is good and what is bad is nearly impossible. So.
That's great. That leads us, in fact, to the concluding set of points for this discussion. Michael, you already have given us an answer in a way to the last question on the screen as to what you would like to see from the chaos engineering community in CNCF. More disruptions, like you said, and more ways to indicate those disruptions, and methods to validate whether we see expected behavior or no. Just to cover a few more things before we end. In the organizations and projects where you did implement chaos engineering practices, were there any KPIs that were set? Generally, how are these KPIs defined? Are they at service level or they're at product level? What are these KPIs that are generally set? And did you manage to see any tangible outcomes, any benefits by doing chaos engineering that were significant? Basically, did the practice of chaos engineering help you in an impactful way? Would you like to just share some comments on that?
Yes. So one of usual cases is yeah. Sorry, just a second.
Sure.
Just.
I think this has been quite insightful. If there are any questions that we'd like to ask Michael, we can.
Yeah. Hello. I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just. Yeah, so speaking of KPIs, it's like, for example, number of requests per second. Normally, such teams as I worked with recently, they look at their system more like a product. So we say, all right, let's check if the system is capable of serving 10 requests per second, for example, or 1,000 requests per second, and how it behaves. So in this regard, it's load testing, right? Not exactly like we don't disrupt anything, but we still want to test this non-functional aspect. Yeah, another bit is provisioning of stress number of replicas, for example, in Kubernetes. Will our configuration of cluster autoscaler scale out and scale in back when we remove this load? And it's important to test it in separation, like similar to unit tests. Just provisioning number of replicas without all these requests to isolate potential problems with configuration of cluster autoscaler. There are like 42 configuration options of it. Yeah, so
all right.
What if some of the replica is killed? How, speaking of KPI, like how fast system will recover if some replicas are killed? What if all replicas are killed or just half of them?
Yeah, I think
so. Eventually those KPIs they ideally end up with some user-facing behavior, like was request served or not. Ideally, so in ideally they should be very simple, you know. So it either works or not. But under the hood, where can we be really creative is how we trying to break the system, and this is where these effects and various options to induce chaos or induce issues are very handy, right? Because user at the end of the day wants only like that his request is served, right? So it's hard to predict like what's needed. So again, speaking of like development of frameworks for chaos engineering, I guess the focus should be on visibility into the components, like system components, and various effects of inducing those issues and disruptions, because it can be generified to good extent.
All right. I think that's all we had in terms of what we wanted to know. There are, of course, more questions that might come up in the minds of folks here. I'm sure they can reach out to you. We will put your details on the meeting notes.
Sure.
And in case you'd like us to, you would like to take us through a focused demonstration of how you've been doing your chaos experiments, we'll be happy to have that in a subsequent call. Thank you so much for your time, Michael, and answering all the questions and giving us an insight into your views about chaos engineering and what your experience has been implementing it in different organizations.
Yeah, sure, my pleasure. Because my pleasure, because I guess it's quite beneficial that people who are laying foundation and building frameworks, they hear from like actual users.
Yeah. Yes, that's really the point of these conversations. So yeah, thank you once again. Are there any other questions for Michael at this time?
No, thank you very much, Michael. This was very insightful. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm also very late for this meeting. Thanks for great sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's the only item we had in our agenda. We will have the recording put up for this meeting as well. You can see the rest of them are Zoom links. They will be replaced by YouTube links very soon, in fact, today. And we will also put up the current discussion. So the idea would be for us to take some insights from this conversation and place it in a dedicated section on the white paper in terms of community learnings. So we will have that discussed in our next call, how we are putting things up. Meanwhile, if you would like to invite folks from the community and from the industry to come and present about chaos engineering, that would be very appreciated. So feel free to bring your contacts in for this session. The idea would be to have at least 4-5 sessions like this and have a working draft by the KubeCon time. If you feel that you have a user who is willing to present before next sync up call 2 weeks later, if you feel someone is ready in the interim, we'll be happy to have this meeting on demand. I think the folks who will be able to make it can join. For the others, we always have the recording and details of the presenter to go back and ask more questions. That way we will be able to cover more such discussions before we have a white paper with significant material. So feel free to add to the agenda and propose a date for these calls. If we do not have anything, I think our next meeting will be on schedule 2 weeks later.
Thank you very much, Karthik. Really appreciate you coordinating all this.
Thank you. Thanks, Aradhana. Thanks, Shengwen, Michael, all for joining today. Have a great weekend ahead. Bye.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you too. Thanks so much for
Thanks.
for
Thanks very
attending.
much.
Yeah, listening to me. Have later. Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.